for gracing us this evening. This event is actually oversubscribed. As you can see, there are people who are outside trying to get in. Unfortunately, we will not be able to accommodate them. In case you are wondering why this event is oversubscribed, it is not because I am going to be speaking. It's because Dr. Khoza is going to be speaking. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of a few people. Professor Alex Broadbent, the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities. If you could just lift your arm so that you could be seen. Professor Laila Patel, the organizer of this event, our distinguished professor, who is also a SACI chair. As for those of you who are not in the know, the SACI chair is a prestigious research chair that is funded by the Department of Science and Technology. Laila, if you could just raise your arm so that you could be seen. Professor Chris Landsberg. You see, Adolf Hitler, when he was arrested, he was imprisoned in the Landsberg prison. There is no connection between the two. Professor Chris Landsberg is a good man of good repute. I also would like to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Isaac Shongwe. He is a Rhodes Scholar. He went to Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar. Isaac's here, we talk about decolonization. So when we talk about Rhodes Scholarship, there are people who I'm sure they are about to jump up their seats. I also understand that Mrs. Zanele Mbeki, our former First Lady, is actually going to be here. I'm not too sure whether she has arrived, so I'm going to acknowledge her in her absence. The Helen Joseph lecture is one of the key lectures that is undertaken by the University of Johannesburg. As we all know, some of us might not know, Mrs. Helen Joseph was a stalwart in the struggle. She participated in the Women's March in the 50s. The iconic picture of women actually demanding equal rights in South Africa actually bears her image. And indeed it's important that in honor of this great legend, we always bring people who are about advancing who we are as a society, positive advancement, because you can advance negatively. And this year, we are going to be hearing from Dr. Makhosi Khoza. I don't think she needs any introduction. We'll actually be eagerly waiting to listen to her. University of Johannesburg is really about the contestation of ideas. Ideas are actually quite important for the advancement of society. I am reminded of what Steve Biko once said. I quote, "It is better to die for an idea that will live than to live for an idea that will die." Close quote. So it is important that a space that allows ideas to be contested be created. Because it is only when we as a society engage in ideas that we are going to advance positively. A society that does not talk to itself and to the outer world is doomed. And as the University of Johannesburg, we are quite keen to make sure that we advance ideas. In this regard, there are many ways in which we We advance ideas. We do it through engagements such as this. We also do this through research that matters. Our research agenda is guided by the need to develop our society, our continent, and ultimately the world. And in this regard, I am glad to say that University of Johannesburg is now one of the most significant research producers in the country. According to the Shanghai University rankings, the University of Johannesburg is ranked number 4. And this is ahead of University of Pretoria and University of KwaZulu-Natal. Competition is good. There is nothing wrong with competition. But research is important because one of the colonial legacies that we have inherited as a society is the practice that knowledge tended to be generated in the developed North, and we were only consumers of that knowledge. And I think in this century, the University of Johannesburg would like to change that. We would like to create knowledge that is going to be used domestically and also to be used throughout the world, including the developed North. It's actually turning some of the principal aims of colonization on their heads, making sure that we produce knowledge, not just consume knowledge. As the University of Johannesburg, our teaching and learning is advancing. The success rates of our students, very, very good students. I was just telling Isaacs that, in this room we have another Rhodes Scholar, Professor Chris Landsberg, who also studied at Oxford. He was a Rhodes Scholar also, and an alumni of this university. And currently we have 2 Rhodes Scholars at the University of Oxford who are alumni of this university. So teaching and learning for us is actually quite key. 85% success rate is good, and we are doing this without actually at the same time increasing the quality of education that we offer. I think you can give us an applause for that. Now, Dr. Khoza, where are we going as the University of Johannesburg? We, as the University of Johannesburg, we are taking the University of Johannesburg into the 4th industrial age. The first industrial age gave us the steam engine. For some mysterious reason, it happened in some island, not in the mainland of Europe, England. That was the place where the first industrial revolution happened. Why? Nobody really knows. Because probabilistically it should have happened in India or China, population densities, but it happened there. The second industrial age came as a result of the ideas that also came from the same island. The fact that if you have a magnet and you have something that conducts electricity, and you move a magnet, you get electricity. That's what Eskom does using coal. They heat water that moves a conductor next to a magnet, and that is how we get electricity from Eskom. And of course, the corollary of that is that if you take the same magnet and the conductor and you put electricity through it, it moves. That is an electric motor. That's what we call an assembly line. The practice obviously was in the United States, but the ideas were completely English. And then the third industrial revolution gave us electronics, computers, internet, and the genesis of that was when the scientists discovered that, there are material that conduct electricity under certain conditions. And because of that, efficient switches, something called a transistor. You can see I'm an engineer. Was born. Now we are in the fourth industrial revolution, where absolutely everything around us is going to be automated. And as our Chancellor, Professor Njabulo Ndebele, teaches us, we were objects of the first, second, and the third industrial revolutions. We cannot afford to be objects of the fourth industrial revolution. We have to become subjects. And that is what the University of Johannesburg is all about. With those few words, thank you very much, and I am looking forward to hearing from Dr. Khoza. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not Dr. Khoza. I am the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, and mine is the second of the 3 introductory speeches. It gives me enormous pleasure to introduce the 12th Helen Joseph Lecture at the University of Johannesburg, organised by the Centre for Social Development in Africa. Allow me to add my own special welcome to all of you, but in particular to our guest speaker, Dr. Khoza, and also to our former First Lady, Mrs. Zanele Mbeki, if indeed she's made it, which I hope she will by the time the introductions are finished. It's part of the UJ vision, as Professor Mwala has indicated, as well as a personal conviction of mine, that universities are meant to serve society, and the academic activities that go on inside them are ultimately supposed to make our world a better place. Ultimately, that is the point of having universities. Making the world a better place could be in very concrete ways, such as developing drugs that will cure us of diseases, or devices that enable us to communicate at the touch of a button over long distances, and so forth. But there are other ways that universities serve society. They provide spaces, and I promise I didn't confer with the Vice-Chancellor-designate on this speech, they provide spaces for ideas to be generated and criticised. In a time when we hear a lot about the fourth industrial revolution, it is no surprise to hear that universities are places for innovation. But as much as they are places for innovation, they are also places for criticism. They are places for speaking truth to power. This is not a random juxtaposition. On the contrary, innovation and criticism go together. Creative thinking is fundamentally a critical process, as any biography of a great thinker, be it inventor or author, mathematician or musician, will show. The same goes for our social and political structures. Societies where free speech is allowed, and thus criticism can occur without fear, have historically been those where innovation has flourished, and these societies have generally gone on to reap material benefits from the ensuing innovations. Thus, freedom of speech, including the freedom to criticize without fear, are not merely nice to have. They are the lifeblood of a flourishing society. Remove the freedom to exchange ideas freely, and society withers. Universities have a central role to play in providing a space for this sort of exchange to occur, and this includes, on occasion, speaking truth to power. Helen Joseph, after whom this lecture series is named, was well known for her powerful advocacy in the interests of those without voices and of a fairer society. Past speakers in this series of lectures have shared these traits, and our speaker tonight, Dr. Makhosi Khoza, continues the fine tradition of conscientious and respected advocates of the right and the fair, willing to raise their voices and even to take personal risks when the ideas of right and fairness seem in danger of being submerged or forgotten. Dr. Khoza is a former Member of Parliament of this Republic and former chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Public Service. She held this role in difficult times, if I can put it like that, and has even reported receiving threats on her life. She resigned from the ANC on the 21st of September this year, saying that she would not be led by leaders who have lost legitimacy and credibility. These are brave words and powerful actions, and I do not want to say more than this by way of introduction, since I'm sure we will hear more brave and powerful words this evening. So let me now hand over to Professor Leila Patel, the Director of the Centre for Social Development in Africa, who will properly introduce our speaker. Thank you.
So it's a great honor for me to introduce Dr. Makhosi Khoza to you this evening. Dr. Khoza has become a household name in a very short time. She's been vilified, subjected to the worst name-calling and gender stereotyping in a party where there's little room for dissent. For others, she is very much still Lady Sianova, meaning the disruptor, a nickname that she earned when she was 14 years old. Born in Harwood in Pietermaritzburg and raised by a grandmother who had a profound influence on her life, she grew into a self-assured woman and an inspiring leader who has come to make an important mark on our current political landscape. A voice to be reckoned with, one among many that are ignored at our nation's peril. Who then is Makhosi Khoza? This is a question that is often asked, and one I asked when I watched the public protector interviews. I do not claim to know her, so although we may have crossed paths in the women's movement in the 1980s when she was in the Natal Organization of Women, and I was in the Transvaal Federation of Women, but maybe we didn't. But piecing together the different pieces of her and her life that is publicly available, three things stand out for me. The first is the intersection between her life experiences as a young woman, the personal, and the public issues that she has been engaged with all her life, the political, that propelled her to become an activist at a very early age in student, youth, and women's structures, and as a member of the African National Congress. The rallying call of earlier feminists that the personal is political is very much a part of her life story. Second, one is struck by how much she has achieved in her life, tackling many obstacles, overcoming personal losses, detention, being cared for by others when she couldn't live with her own family as a young woman, being widowed, juggling motherhood with being the sole provider of her family, pursuing her studies, building a career in the public and private sectors and in politics. And I hope our students can hear her this evening. And those who are not in this room but are in the venue next door, that I hope that they will take the inspiration from Makhosi. Dr. Khoza holds a master's degree in policy and development and a doctorate in public administration from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. One of her passions is to unite South Africa through language, and I think she will speak about this evening. To this end, she wrote an isiZulu textbook using numerical equations, and it sounded very clever and daunting to me. I'm not mathematical at all. Until recently, Dr. Khoza was a member of Parliament, as Alex Broadbent said, and formerly the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Public Service and Administration. She's also known to have been the youngest deputy mayor in the country at 26 years of age. Finally, she tells a story to a journalist, Susan de Groot, that says a lot about her, and I draw on that this evening. It is a story about the play that she acted in at her mother's Stokvel when she was a little girl. Apparently, it is a play that was much loved by everyone and enjoyed. And we also hear that Makhosi as a child, and I think still continue to enjoy singing and acting. But tellingly, the message of the play was an anti-corruption message. A message that she has taken into her public life and for which she is widely respected by most South Africans today. Join me in welcoming Dr. Makhosi Khoza.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much, Elela, for those kind words. Yeah, after that, you know, it's kind of emotional when you're talking about my childhood, especially my grandmother, because she had very serious words to convey to me, which I'm not going to be talking about tonight. But the Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg, Prof. Aaron Rensburg, the Vice Chancellor designate, Prof. Chilisa Mawala, the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, Prof. Alex Broadbent, and the Director of the CSTA at this university, Prof. Leila Patel. The University of Johannesburg family, friends, patriots, compatriots. Thank you very much for affording us the honor to participate in the memorial lecture of Helen Joseph, an outstanding change advocate, an internationalist, and an exceptional leader in all respects of international standards. I find a number of parallels between the lives of Helen Joseph and Che Guevara, the latter of which had this to say, open quote, "If you tremble with indignation at every injustice, then you are a comrade of mine," close quote. And I hope I have a lot of comrades of mine, because probably that explains who I'm trying to be. Now, I would like to talk to you more about conscience versus consciousness, because as a member of parliament, I've had an experience where, as politicians, we were told to follow political consciousness in the absence of moral conscience. Now, when you invited me here, one of the things I thought about Helen Joseph is that she epitomizes the highest form of human consciousness. She is a living testimony of what Martin Luther King Jr. declared, open quote, "An injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere," close quote. I say this as Helen Joseph was born in England into a life of privilege. She completed a degree in English at the University of London in 1927, and in 1930, married dentist Dr. Billy Joseph. It would have been all too easy for somebody of her skin pigmentation and place of origin to have enjoyed all the privileges that came with being white in colonial and apartheid South Africa, as so many did. And I think at this stage, I think there is a narrative that we do need to correct in South Africa. And that also includes the narrative about the real founders of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. And Helen Joseph was amongst those. If you go back to the Women's Charter of 1954, read it carefully. It precedes the Freedom Charter. And yet, women are hardly acknowledged. We talk about the Freedom Charter. We hardly talk about the women that were the first ones to speak about a non-racial South Africa. I think it's important to remember that this compassionate woman, with this highest form of awareness of the human spirit, opted for a life dedicated to freeing those that were oppressed, a life, consequently, of persecution. Helen Joseph, in justice for all human beings, but particularly for Black African women. her extraordinary pursuit of justice led to her being arrested on a charge of high treason in December 1956, being banned in 1957, becoming the first person to be placed under house arrest in 1962, surviving several assassination attempts, including bullets shot through her bedroom window late at night and a bomb wired to her front gate. As we sit here today, celebrating the best high purposeful life, filled life of Helen Joseph, we would be remiss to not remember the many other phenomenal women and men of virtue, such as Ruth First, Victoria Mxenge, Jabu Ndlovu from my hometown in Pietermaritzburg. She was a shop steward of Mau, and she was burned together with her family in Mbali, Pietermaritzburg. Dulcie September, and the Craddock Four, and many other comrades who did not survive to experience the greatest moment of South Africa, the 27th April 1994. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's very important for us to appreciate the importance of the precondition for the highest level of human consciousness, which in my opinion is moral conscience. One's consciousness is therefore a reflection of one's moral conscience. Helen Joseph would not associate with any organization that divorces moral conscience from its political consciousness. The only reason she fought the apartheid system is because it represented an unjust form of consciousness, which was at odds with her own moral conscience. It said apartheid was a wrong, unjust, and unfair system. Today, the organization she once associated with tells its members of parliament that they must not vote according to their moral conscience. And by the way, this is a constitutional right in the new South Africa, the right to moral conscience that members of parliament are today told that they cannot exercise. The only organization she once believed in now puts the life of an individual above that of a collective, the people. Today, the organization that she believed in persecutes truth in the name of organizational discipline. What is the difference between conscience and consciousness? Are these two not inextricably linked? Ladies and gentlemen, to me, they are like the chopsticks of morality, inseparable, interdependent, interrelated, and interconnected. Now, consciousness can be defined simply as the state of awareness, be it self-awareness, social awareness, political awareness, economic awareness, physiological or spiritual awareness. If I were to quote Muresanu. He says, it is the function of the human mind that receives and processes information, crystallizes it, stores or rejects it with the help of the five senses, which are taste, sight, touch, smell, sound, reasoning, ability, imagination, and emotion, and or memory. Therefore, political consciousness denotes awareness of how the physical world operates, be it economically, power relations, processes of interactions, etc. Now, if we look at conscience, on the other hand, it takes political consciousness to a different level, a much higher level, where man is called upon to make a value judgment between what is wrong and right, good or bad, righteous or evil, normal or abnormal, just or unjust, fair or unfair. Ideally, you know, when I talk about the disconnect between conscience and consciousness, I know my mentor is here, Isaac Shongwe. You know, I'm trying, Isaac, not to speak too much about the ANC, but it's very difficult to talk about the South African future without making a mention of the ANC. You know, ladies and gentlemen, you will have to forgive me because maybe I might be seem to be going for a juggler here. But you see, political consciousness, in the absence of moral conscience, results in a troubled politician. Now, President Gezeshegisa, Jacob Zuma, and most of his ANC, NEC leadership may have political consciousness. Without a doubt, I don't think they have moral conscience. Now, President Mandela, on the other hand, possessed both in abundance. On the 8th August 2017, ANC MPs, myself included, were told to divorce ourselves from moral conscience. And some of you may know that I took onto my Facebook wall, and I said, how do I divorce moral conscience from myself? Then I wouldn't be existing. So everything that I've been taught in the ANC then will become valueless. Now, these orders did not just come from President Zuma, but also from the ANC collective leadership. It is therefore clearly the responsibility of the ANC as a brand to own up to these directives, which placed the moral character of the movement into disrepute, and more importantly, plunged the country into crisis. Just as KPMG is now suffering the consequences for their amoral, immoral, unprofessional, and unethical conduct. The ANC as a brand must face the consequences for their actions. Unashamedly, the ANC collective leadership elevated political consciousness above moral conscience. Unbelievably, the ANC collective leadership erased moral conscience from equation of its decision-making processes on critical societal matters. Simply put, the ANC collective leadership officially totally removed the sense of wrong and right in matters that pertain to the governance of the Republic. Those members of Parliament who sought to be truthful and followed their moral conscience were persecuted. In response, South Africans should exercise their right by voting them out of power. The ANC is not a religion. A friend of mine once said, you know, because I had to speak to friends of mine before I resigned, I said, hey, friend, listen, man, I have this situation. Now, if I join a Kaizer Chiefs because I love soccer, now the Kaizer Chiefs decides to be a burial club. What do I do? The mission has changed. You see, these kinds of things happen. This is not a folktale story. I'm telling you about something that really happens because I think the ANC is no longer what we joined. It's something else. Now, it's important again to say the ANC is not a religion. When I say this is because the ANC, especially in a constitutional democracy, is voted in and it can also be voted out. It is not a product of calling. It is a political organization whose relevance is determined by the quality of service and moral posture in society. As a constitutional democracy, we must teach the ANC that we are a democracy that is conscious. Because you may have a democracy that is unconscious. In that case, you keep on voting the people that are violating the rights of the people, that are continuing with injustices in the land without any consequence. It therefore stands to reason that the current political leadership crisis engulfing our country emanates from this disconnect between political consciousness and moral conscience. Given the fact that our country is going through the worst moral leadership crisis since the advent of democracy in 1994, it is thus important that we reconnect, realign, integrate, and fuse together political consciousness and moral conscience. Unfortunately, the country cannot rebuild itself under the ANC rule. Of course, they will tell you that the ANC is going to self-correct. I've been told that a lot of times, that it is like the ocean. It self-corrects. You do nothing, it's just going to self-correct. You know, we need to understand that the ANC, for it to self-correct, I concur with Khalima. Of course, I don't agree with him with his last statement, if you saw his interview, that he would still vote for them in 2019. I don't agree with that. But I agree with him when he said, for the ANC to learn, it first has to die. And then it can resurrect, probably like Jesus did. Now, ladies and gentlemen, given the fact that our country is going through the worst moral crisis since the advent of democracy in 1994, it is thus important that we reconnect, as I already said. And I also want to say, unfortunately for us, the country finds itself entangled in the web of the African National Congress internal factional battles that are inspired and are inspired by the failure to deal decisively with corruption and the institutionalization of a system of patronage politics. The ANC deleted moral conscience from its soul and replaced it with patronage politics and corruption. We therefore have a ruling party that has political consciousness but no moral soul. The ANC as a ruling party now finds itself in its worst leadership crisis since its inception in 1912. In hindsight, I realized that the ANC disintegration was bound to happen due to the fact that its evolution in time began to assume a family lineage character. The latter opens the ANC to the risk of nepotism that would snowball this system of patronage politics until it explodes, taking the country with it. Divorcing the ANC from the family legacy and battle for inheritance is almost an impossible undertaking. We are speaking from experience. Moral and ethical objectivity, rationality, and reasonability could never coexist in the face of institutionalized corruption and patronage politics. I'm sure some of you as students here have even tried to join the ANC branch to get your membership card. There's a lot of gatekeeping. So even the outcome of the December conference is going to be the outcome of a gate-kept process. So there is no leader at the ANC December elective conference that would emerge. And this is my argument. This is my argument. I don't think there is any leader at the ANC December elective conference that would emerge without signing a pact with the devil. When a society is led by an organization whose leaders unashamedly defend looting, corruption, and breakdown of critical institutions to support democracy, and institutions that are engines of growth, such as the Office of the Public Protector, South African Broadcasting Corporation, Eskom, National Treasury, South African Receiver of Revenue, we should know we are in a serious leadership crisis. The morality of a society is decaying. We are in trouble. For example, Faith Mutambi, I'm talking about something that happened a few days ago, if you've been following. Faith Mutambi, the Minister of Public Service, and by the way, she fired me. As a chair of the committee, they told me, they actually, I went for a disciplinary by an ANC study group. They said, when are with your moral conscience, you are not going to survive here. You are going. And I did go. Now, this minister says nothing wrong with employing and flying her relatives and friends. Did you see that? No, she said, no, there's nothing wrong. No, but that is the most important thing. I don't know if some of you understand the importance of that ministry. She's actually responsible for the implementation of Chapter 10 of our Constitution. That is responsible for setting high standards of professional ethics, not just at national sphere of government, at provincial, local, in the SOEs, in state organs. And flying my friends and family, there's nothing wrong with that. Without following any procedure, I just decided today I'm bringing in these people. And the graduates, the unemployed graduates, what must they feel when they know that, in other words, what that says to me, it's saying the patronage politics, nepotism, is now the new policy of the ANC. And it has become its new moral signature. So when we say corruption has been institutionalized by the ruling party, this is exactly what we mean. It is normal in the today's ANC to help yourself to the public purse. Nobody gets punished. No minister ever gets, you can do as you wish. I mean, you know these things, man. Hey, let me not talk too much about this thing. Let's talk about the road to democracy. You know, our road to democracy was bumpy and torturous. Yet when we finally arrived at our future destination in 1994, I hope you still remember, guys. Those of, I'm not talking about the ones that are below my age, okay? I'm talking about people from my age onwards. Tina, we will tell you this story now. The young ones must just listen. We felt a sense of relief, excitement, jubilation, and satisfaction that the struggle against white supremacy and apartheid was not in vain. And we felt that, wow, at long last, we can live happily together, as the Freedom Charter promised us, that there shall be peace, friendship, comfort, security. You know, we felt this thing. We felt that. We grabbed it. We felt it as we're standing in those queues. If you remember very well, that's how we felt. Sadly, just over 20 years after the 1994 exhilaration, the nation is disintegrating before our eyes. Our nation seems to be taking the last spot where it is meant to take the first spot, and the first spot where it is supposed to take the last spot. For example, South Africa ranks amongst the highest in terms of violence, be it farm killings, be it murder and rape of women, be it crime. We are also racing to assume the top spot in corruption, outpacing our rivals dominantly. Yet, when it comes to mathematics and science, I have my engineer here. We are sadly number 139 out of 189 in the world. That is fact. And I feel particularly sad because we declared this year the year of O.R. Tambo. And this is a leader who loved mathematics and science. He was so passionate. Some of us that had the opportunity as young people went to Lusaka in the late 1980s. The first thing that O.R. Tambo would ask you, he would ask you what grade you are. And he would also be asking you whether you are doing mathematics or science, you know? And unfortunately, this is what we have today. We are number 139 out of 139 in the world. Neither even under the apartheid did we have 50 schools burnt down in one area, and that is Vuwani in 2016. Where was the South African intelligence? Probably busy chasing after some ANC faction. Maybe Pravin here and Jonas there, I don't know. Where is the political leadership in all this? This begs the question. Why have we not heard of an MEC for education in that particular province? Responsible for, who oversees this? To take full responsibility and even be fired. In most democracies, when something like that happens, the politician is the one that must fall. Anyway, I'm not talking about fees must fall. And ladies and gentlemen, violence against women is at its worst. Some of you might have seen, if you follow social media, you saw Batabile Dlamini and her Women's League crew in their regalia, Women's League regalia, with those, sunlight liquid and margarine going to that family. They are actually making a mockery of the violence against women. If you did see it, if you didn't, ask somebody, they will give you that picture. It's very embarrassing. Human life has become so cheap in our society. We never thought that we could have a repeat of the Sharpeville massacre or June 16, 1976 tragedy in the form of Marikana 2012 tragedy, where more than 34 South Africans were killed. The Marikana tragedy is sadly not over. It is 2017, and people continue to be killed in the mining community. Our political leaders do not take responsibility. We have a collective leadership of, angazi. Hey, once again, hey, yes, angazi, I don't know, you know? And for this tragedy, who took the fall? A woman, Police Commissioner Pierre. Why did the Minister of Police not get fired for the Marikana massacre? What actually happened with him? He was reshuffled to another sport that is going to ensure that he doesn't lose his pegs as the minister that you know today. Okay. Now, comrades and friends, I think it is very important for us to deepen our understanding and appreciation of the key embodiments of what constitute leadership qualities of Helen Joseph's stature, caliber, and moral stamina, as we believe this would contribute in elevating the critical importance of moral and ethical leadership in building a prosperous and united society. And I want to repeat, no society can prosper if it is led by an amoral and immoral leadership. And I do want to say to you, just reflect, when it comes to the Quality Political Leadership Index, I suspect we would make it into the Guinness Book of Records for protecting and giving the second term to the most disgraceful president the world has ever had. We gave the world President Nelson Mandela. When the world cheered us, we were very angry South Africans. And we wanted to teach the world the lesson. We gave them President Jacob Zuma. What a contradiction. We are also hailed as having the best constitution in the world. but its disregard by the ruling party diminishes its worth. We are therefore number one in terms of a country that did not like being famous for the right thing. We have a president that remains in office despite violating the Constitution, our supreme law of the land. He has even violated every rule of his own ANC constitution. Truth be told, can we only blame him for this, or should we blame the ANC that shields him? Why should we give the ANC another chance in 2019? When it disregards our people as they marched on the 7th of April, and the ANC behaved as if nothing has happened. The state capture where the Gupta family controlled state affairs, the landing of this Gupta family in one of our national key points, security points, no politician for this scandal. Instead, some Bruce Polokwane from my town, by the way, he's from Sobantu, from Pietermaritzburg, became a fall guy. Why should our youth and women entrust the ANC with the responsibility to govern in 2019? And you'll understand later on why I'm saying that when I conclude my speech. Why specifically youth and women? You see, let's appreciate the power of the voter. A voter is a very powerful person in a democratic and constitutional dispensation. A voter gets to hire and fire political parties. A vote is the most powerful instrument in the hand of a citizen. Therefore, the voter must not just complain about corruption, nepotism, arrogant leadership, poor service delivery, high unemployment rates, crime, violence, poor quality education, low economic growth. The voter must exercise this right wisely. For example, in each election, the ANC promises to deal with corruption. If you go back to its manifesto, election manifesto, you will find corruption there. We shall deal decisively with corruption. We will deal with crime. And at some point, we even promise people that we will create over 500,000 jobs. You remember? And we lost more than that. We didn't create those. We actually lost those jobs, especially in the engineering and metal industries. Now, I am saying we need to ensure that a voter can correct the anomaly in a society through a ballot. The moment for a voter to shine comes once after 5 years. Despite the many challenges we have in our country, the South African voter now understands the value of their vote. And to me, honestly, I must say that I congratulate South Africans, because the fact that South Africans stood up and said, we are tired of this, and they united behind the new South African flag, and they were saying, we want a change in leadership. To me, that is active citizenry, and we need to encourage that. And I also think that the South African voter is more sophisticated than earlier assumed. The 2016 local government elections saw real democracy at work when traditional ANC voters, of course, I don't encourage them staying at home, but they did, and that is why the ANC lost 4 metros in one single election. Now, I think I need very quickly to just cover this aspect, because it bothers me. I don't think we talk about it a lot. And that is the need to shift the perspective of the voter and the liberation movement. In societies that emerge from the liberation struggle, be it against colonialism or colonialism of a special type or apartheid, corruption somehow gets institutionalized. When liberation movements become ruling parties, entitlement to govern at will without regard to moral standards and ethics creeps in as they control state resources, organs of state, the economy, in some countries, even courts. They literally become bigger than God. Remember, the ANC said, its leaders at least, said the ANC shall rule until Jesus comes back and goes back. Government departments thus becomes the patronage dispensing the machine. The longer the voter realizes that she or he has freedom of association, freedom of speech, freedom to establish a political party, freedom to moral conscience, the better for this country. And the greater the prospects of bringing back our focus on our the better for us to bring our mission to a prosperous path. Now, in fact, this entitlement liberation struggle syndrome is very, very crippling to the voter, because all the time people, they still, in fact, I remember Khalima Muntlante would say, you know, we have almost become conservative as the ANC because we seek to conserve the past. We are no longer looking at the future. We are almost becoming like more of a conservative party than a liberation movement that that is supposed to be liberating the people from the shackles of colonialism and so forth. Having the political power concentrated in one or two parties in societies like ours, I want to argue, is suicidal. Either way, it has a risk of reversing the gains of freedom. I don't wish to go through that. I don't wish to go into this in detail. But I do want to sensitize us that we should not cast aspersions on people that are trying to start parties. I mean, even in Rampela Mampela, she tried, she failed. She created a platform for others to learn the lesson from her failures. And the mistakes, the kissing and whatnot, didn't work. Yet, on the other hand, you have the liberation movement turned political parties saying, you see, we told you, without us, apartheid is coming back when, say, conservative people dominate society. Because truth be told, the reality is that in South Africa, the race card is being used all the time. If you are going to come there and maybe a party that has a significant number of white people, when that party wins, the ANC will say, you see, we told you going back to apartheid. Yet when it is the ANC, the other parties that are conservative will be saying, you see, we told you, black men can't govern. They can't govern. They can't govern themselves. They need us. Ideally, after the liberation struggle, we should encourage the formation of new parties. Liberation struggle sentimentalism is reversing the gains of our hard-earned victories. I know that we are all suffering from that, and by the way, that is why I stayed in the ANC for 35 years, from when I was 12 years old. And it's not that I didn't see these things. I also believe that the ANC would self-correct. And this sentimentalism, that it has done it before. You know, in Maragoro, you know, comrades, when we talk about that, that no, it happened there. Yeah, even Christian was in trouble at some point. But hey, man, the ANC corrected itself. It's no longer like that. The difference now is that we control the public purse. We didn't control it then. Let's face the fact. The ANC was founded in 1912 to defend and advance the rights of the African people after the violent destruction of their independence and the creation of the white supremacist Union of South Africa. Wouldn't you agree with me that the ANC has undoubtedly achieved this mission. It has. Expecting it to usher us into a united and prosperous South Africa, unfortunately, is sadly suicidal. Evidence suggests that transitioning a liberation movement into a governing one does not move beyond establishing systems for the future. As soon after that, the liberation movement turned ruling party starts undoing all the gains it has made. Christopher Clapham captures this well in his question. And by the way, he is basing it, it's not that it's coming from him. He had a conference where there were all these comrades from the different liberation movements, including us in South Africa, where he termed it the curse of liberation, where he chronicles the past legacies on the challenges of transition in Africa. He argues, open quote, throughout Africa, and indeed in much of the world, there are movements that have fought long and hard with great heroism and often at a great cost in order to achieve the liberation of their peoples and their territories from oppressive regimes. Once liberation has been achieved and the former liberation movement has assumed power as a national government, the struggle has generally been regarded as an enormously positive legacy for the new state and the regime that rules it. The more intense the struggle, indeed, the greater advantages conferred on the new government. The now victorious movements inherit from the struggle a powerful sense of legitimacy. These are the people who have been prepared to sacrifice their lives for the cause and who come to power with an abiding memory of the martyrs who have died in order for them to do so. Nonetheless, visually, all liberation movements have experienced considerable difficulties in actually making the transition from struggle to government. As the problems mount, it becomes all too easy to view the legacies of the struggle not as a blessing, but as a curse, close quote. In order for South Africans to continue cherishing its glorious liberation struggle history, it is pivotal that we make necessary shifts soon so we may not end up thinking of our hard-earned democratic victories as curses. We want to cherish our hard-earned victories. We have to accept that the ANC that we know accomplished its mission. We have to confront the brutal, bitter truth that this new alien and corrupt ANC is undoing all that we fought for now. In conclusion, our vote is central in ensuring that South Africa gets back on its united, prosperous path in 2019. Never before has the future of South Africa rested in the mighty hands of our youth, black or white, Indian or colored, female or male, as according to Independent Electoral Commission, IEC, 80% of the 26.2 million registered voters in South Africa in 2016 local government elections were 30 years and younger. This suggests that the 2019 elections will not be fought on struggle credentials, as by 2019, more than 80% of voters would have been born from 1987. Some of them would have been born 1997, post-1994. These young South Africans must know that the future of this country is now solely in their defining hands. And I also think that we also have to say, in honor of Helen Joseph, a phenomenal woman of substance who exhibited the unifying ideals of feminist empowerment. And by the way, I am a feminist. I'm sorry to those that don't support feminism. Thank you. South African women, we make up 14 million of the 2.6 million, 26.2 million registered voters. This represents a staggering 53% of the South African sky. In other words, the 2019 election marks the change in the political landscape, which has been dominated by ideologies. And let's refresh ourselves. Amika Cabral once said, open quote, "Always bear in mind that the people are not fighting for ideas, for the things in anyone's head. They are fighting to win material benefits, to live better and in peace, to see their lives go forward, to guarantee the future of their children." I therefore want to say, South African youth, women, the future of this country, the prosperous path that we are yearning for, the moral leadership that South Africa wants is in your hands. Right here, in your hands. Come 2019, please save South Africa. I thank you.
Talking about no holds barred, hey? Another round of applause for our speaker. Dr. Khoza, you clearly had a lot you really had to get off your chest after your abrupt departure as a member of Parliament. Good evening, everybody. My role is a simple one, but of course a very important one, and that's to express a few words of thanks and gratitude. Let me start with our Vice-Chancellor designate, to thank him for his stewardship and leadership, Professor Marwala. Let me also recognize our Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research elect, Professor Surab Sinha. He's here. Isaac Shongwe, it's good to see you. You've gone grey, eh, I must say.
I was actually talking about you.
Oh, sorry. So, DVC, I should just tell you that Isaac Shongwe was actually my predecessor at Christchurch College. So he opened the way. It's good to see you, Isaac. And Dr. Khoza, good luck for having Isaac as your mentor. To the Dean of Humanities, Professor Broadband, thank you for your support and encouragement as always. To my colleague, Professor Leila Patel, congratulations to you for once again having risen to the occasion. Well done with all the brilliant work you're doing at CSDA, and of course being a fellow Sarchi chair, and for your leadership in that regard. But of course, I'm not here to thank all of those people. My most important word of gratitude is to our guest speaker tonight. So I'm not going to attempt another speech, but let me just try and make a couple of points with your permission. I think it is safe to now call you honorable. So, former member of the ANC in Parliament, I would like to tell you that you deserve to be called honorable. Just try and make a few points that I picked up from the feisty input tonight. So the Oxford scholar Paul Collier wrote a book in 2004 titled Greed and Grievance. It's not a very popular book amongst many African scholars, and certainly not amongst many of Africa's political elite, as David Moore would tell us. But the simple thesis of Paul Collier's book, Greed and Grievance, is that these two phenomena, greed and grievance, can result in the implosion of an organization. It can result in the collapse of a state. And if we're not careful, it can result in civil war. In our case, I would suggest maybe before the Civil War, there might be a youth bulge. Our own, not Arab Spring, but maybe our own summer of discontent. You have warned about the consequences, Dr. Khoza, of greed and grievance in our beloved land. You see, like Helen Joseph, you've become a symbol of defiance, of integrity, and of courage. Like Helen Joseph, reminded us about the clauses of the Freedom Charter, you have reminded us about the clauses of our Constitution. Like Helen Joseph was arrested for high treason, you've been accused of treasonous behavior by your former organization. Just like Helen Joseph triumphed in the struggle for which she dedicated her life, you will prevail in the struggle for justice. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking Dr. Makhosi Khoza. So, Prof, is it now for me to say thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Please join us for something warm and cold to drink. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, yes.